The paralyzed girl had only $3 for a cake, until a humble garbage man approached, and it was the coldest winter Baltimore had seen in over a decade. Icy winds swept through the cracked windows of an aging apartment in Highlandtown, whistling like distant echoes of a past that refused to die. Inside, 17-year-old Emily Thompson sat by the window, her wheelchair motionless, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long since gone cold. The city outside moved fast, too fast. Cars passed, people rushed, lives were lived, but none of it seemed to include her anymore. Not since that night. Emily hadn't walked since the accident. A drunk driver had run a red light and taken both her parents in an instant. She'd survived, barely. The doctors said it was a miracle. Emily didn't feel lucky. A miracle would have been waking up with her legs, her family, her life. Now, she lived with her grandmother, Dolores, in a cramped apartment that smelled of mothballs and medicine. Dolores did what she could with her pension, but the truth was, there was never enough. Not enough food, not enough heat, and definitely not enough hope. But tomorrow was different. It would have been her mother's birthday. And despite everything, Emily had held on to a single dream, to honor her memory with something simple. A cake. Not a big one. Not even a fancy one. Just something small enough to remind the world, and maybe herself, that her mother had mattered. She had exactly $3. That morning, she insisted on going alone. Dolores tried to argue, but Emily was determined. "I need to do this by myself," she said. The streets were slippery, and her gloves weren't enough to fight the cold, biting at her fingers, as she pushed her wheelchair through cracked sidewalks and patches of ice. She passed a few familiar faces. None of them looked her way. Emily was used to that. She reached the bakery just before noon. The scent of warm bread and sugary pastries drifted into the street. A bell jingled as she pushed the door open. Inside, the heat hit her like a wave. Behind the counter, a bored-looking teenager glanced up, chewing gum. "I'd like to buy a small cake," Emily said, placing the 3 crumpled dollar bills on the counter. The boy raised an eyebrow. "That's not enough? Smallest we got is $7.50. Emily hesitated, heart sinking. "Maybe? Is there anything left over? Day old? Anything that's $3? "Nope." She looked back at the display case. Colorful cupcakes, chocolate tarts, mini cheesecakes, all out of reach. As she tried to think of what to say next, she noticed movement outside the shop window. A man stood just beyond the glass. Tall, heavy-set, wearing a neon orange uniform stained with dirt and time. He looked tired. Not just in his body, but in his soul. His name was Harold Jenkins, a city sanitation worker, a garbage man who had walked those same streets for over 20 years. To most, he was invisible, but he saw her. Through the window, he watched the moment she tried to offer her last few dollars for a cake, and failed. Harold didn't know her name, but something in her expression, a mix of determination and heartbreak, struck something inside him, something long buried. He opened the door and stepped inside. His boots squeaked on the floor. Emily turned to him, startled. Without a word, Harold approached the counter, pulled out a crumpled $10 bill from his jacket, and laid it beside her money. "She'll take the little chocolate one," he said quietly to the boy behind the counter. Emily stared at him, confused. "Wait! I can't let you—" Harold turned to her and smiled faintly. "It's for your mother. I lost mine, too." The clerk boxed the cake. Harold handed it to her, nodding once, then turned and walked out before she could even say thank you. Emily sat frozen, the warmth of the box in her lap, tears stinging her eyes. She didn't know who he was, but something told her this wasn't the last time she would see him. The cake sat untouched on the table. Emily had stared at it for nearly an hour. A small chocolate creation with swirls of white icing and delicate sugar flowers on top. It wasn't about the flavor. It wasn't even about the cake itself. It was what it symbolized. Memory. Loss. The ghost of a woman whose laughter still echoed in her dreams. She lit a single candle. The room was dim, lit only by the fading afternoon light filtering through the blinds. Her grandmother had gone to rest in the other room, unaware of how heavy the silence had become. Emily looked at the flickering flame. "Happy birthday, Mom," she whispered. Then she closed her eyes and breathed in deeply. "I miss you." A long pause. No response. Just the silence that had become her closest companion. She blew out the candle. But her thoughts weren't entirely on her mother anymore. That man, the one from the bakery. The way he spoke, his voice quiet, but weighted with something heavy. He didn't ask questions, didn't expect gratitude, and he had walked away so quickly, like he was used to leaving before anyone noticed him. Who does something like that? Emily found herself thinking about his face. Weathered, tired, honest. She didn't even know his name. The next morning, she sat by the same window, watching the alley behind their building. It was the kind of place most people ignored. Dumpsters, cracked pavement, broken bottles. But it was also where the city's sanitation workers passed through daily. It connected to the main road and the back entrances of several old buildings. Around 9, she spotted him. Same orange uniform, same tired posture. Pushing a garbage bin with one hand, holding a metal picker in the other, retrieving a crumpled can from the ice. Her heart skipped. It's him. She hesitated, unsure what to do. Call out? Wave? Would he even remember her? Instead, she watched. He moved with slow precision, not rushed, not lazy, just present, like every movement had weight. After a few minutes, he disappeared around the corner. 3 days passed. Each morning, she waited by the window, and each time, like clockwork, he came. Always in the same path, always gone within 10 minutes. On the 4th day, something changed. There was a flower. It was resting near the dumpster behind her building. A single white carnation, wrapped in brown paper and tied with a red string. No note, no explanation. Emily stared at it through the glass. For several seconds, she didn't move. Her hands trembled slightly on the armrest of her wheelchair. Slowly, she wheeled herself to the back door, down the narrow ramp her grandmother had installed months ago, and made her way toward the flower. She picked it up carefully. The petals were fresh. The paper was clean, dry. It hadn't been there long. She looked around. No one. Just the quiet breath of winter and the low hum of the city beyond the alley. She brought the carnation inside and placed it in a glass of water. She didn't say it aloud, but she knew. It was from him. The gifts didn't stop. The next day, there was a book, The Alchemist, by Paulo Coelho. Slightly worn, dog-eared, but clean. Inside the cover was a handwritten quote on a piece of folded paper. And when you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it. Emily read the line 3 times. Then again, she felt her throat tighten. Another day, it was a small bag of peppermint candies. Another, a laminated card with a quote from Maya Angelou. Each item appeared in the same place. Always quietly. Always without warning. And for the first time in months, she began to feel seen. She didn't tell her grandmother. Some things felt too sacred to share. Instead, she began to wait for them. And, more than that, she began to hope. Hope that he might come when she was there. Hope that he might talk to her again. It was a Thursday morning when Emily left her first reply. A simple note, carefully folded, placed beneath a small rock by the dumpster. She had written, "To the man with the orange coat, thank you for the flower, and the book, and the candy. I don't know why you're doing this, but it matters. More than you know. E." She didn't know if he'd find it, but she left it anyway. And that night, for the first time in over a year, she slept peacefully. The next morning, the note was gone. In its place was a new one, written in careful, neat block letters. "You don't have to thank me. I just wanted you to feel less alone. You remind me of someone I loved very much. H." Emily felt the breath catch in her chest. H. She didn't know what it meant, or who he had loved, but she folded the note like a treasure and placed it in her top drawer. A connection was forming. Quiet, unspoken, but real. And neither of them knew that it would soon change everything. Forever. Snow fell harder that morning. Baltimore looked like a city out of a forgotten postcard. Rooftops coated in white, trees dressed in frost, the streets quieter than usual. Inside the small Highlandtown apartment, Emily sat near the radiator, legs wrapped in a blanket, sketchbook open on her lap. She hadn't drawn in months, not since before the accident. But that morning, something inside her had stirred. Maybe it was the latest note from Harold, now pinned beside her mirror. Maybe it was the way the gifts made her feel, like someone out there still believed she mattered. Her pencil moved hesitantly at first. Then, with more certainty, lines became shapes. Shapes became folds of fabric. She drew dresses, bold, flowing, vibrant. The kind of dresses that belonged on runways, not wheelchairs. She was halfway through a design, a deep violet gown with an open back and lace detailing, when a soft knock echoed from the back door. Not the front, the back. She froze. Another knock, then a voice. Low, gentle, hesitant. "Emily?" She dropped the pencil. It was him. She turned her wheelchair slowly, heart pounding. She hadn't imagined the voice. She knew it. Even though she had only heard him say one sentence at the bakery, she remembered its weight, its kindness. She rolled to the back door and opened it. There he was. Harold stood under the falling snow, the collar of his coat pulled high, a wool beanie over his head. His face was more lined than she remembered, but his eyes, deep brown and cautious, were unmistakably kind. He held something behind his back. "I hope this isn't too weird," he said awkwardly. I figured it was time we actually met." Emily smiled, nervous. "I guess we already have. But not like this." He stepped closer, revealing what he held. A small box wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. "It's nothing fancy, just something I made. I carve stuff when I can't sleep." He held the box out. Emily took it carefully and opened it. Inside was a wooden music box, hand-carved, uneven in places, but beautiful in its imperfection. When she turned the tiny metal crank, a soft melody played, broken and slow, but familiar. "Claire de Lune?" she whispered. Harold nodded. "It was my daughter's favorite." The air changed. Emily's hand stilled on the crank. She looked up. "You had a daughter?" He didn't answer right away. His gaze dropped to the snow-covered steps. She was special, not in the way people usually mean that word. She was born with spina bifida, spent most of her life in a wheelchair. Emily listened, her throat tightening. She loved music, drawing, hated broccoli. Always wanted a puppy but was allergic to everything. She died when she was 8. Hospital said it was complications, but I know better. His jaw clenched slightly. They ignored her pain, said she was exaggerating. I knew something was wrong. I begged them to check again, but they didn't listen. And by the time they did, he swallowed hard. His voice cracked. It was too late. Emily felt a tear fall down her cheek. I'm sorry, she whispered. Harold nodded once, eyes still on the snow. I stopped talking about her years ago. People don't know what to say, so I just stopped saying anything. Silence wrapped around them, but it wasn't empty. It was full of pain, full of understanding. Emily took a shaky breath. My mom used to play this song too, Claire de Lune, when the house was quiet. She said it helped her think. Maybe, Harold said, glancing at her. They're both listening now. That made her smile, even through the tears. From that day on, Harold came by once or twice a week. Never for long. Sometimes he brought things. An old scarf, a book of poetry, a sketch pad. Other times, he just stood on the back steps and talked. About the city, about his job, about how he used to believe life was just survival. One long routine of invisible labor. Emily, in turn, began sharing pieces of herself, her drawings, her dreams, her fear that she'd never matter again. One afternoon, she showed him a design she had sketched just that morning. A sleeveless gown with an embroidered waist and asymmetrical hem. Harold stared at the page. You made this. She nodded. It's stunning. You could be a designer. Emily scoffed, gently. You mean a disabled designer that no one would ever hire? Don't do that, Harold said firmly. Don't cut yourself down before the world even gets the chance. She looked away, ashamed. I'm not trying to be negative, she said. I'm just realistic. No, he replied. You're scared. And that's okay. But don't confuse fear with reality. They're not the same thing. His words landed like bricks in her chest. She didn't answer, but something shifted. That night, Emily sat in bed, staring at the ceiling. She didn't reach for her phone. She didn't scroll. She thought about the girl Harold had lost, about her own mother, about the strange way grief connects people, like a hidden river beneath the surface of life, flowing quietly, pulling strangers together who never should have met. And she thought about what he said. Don't cut yourself down before the world even gets the chance. For the first time in a long while, Emily wondered, what if he's right? The sky above Baltimore was the color of steel, heavy with clouds, thick with the promise of more snow. But in the small apartment in Highlandtown, something else was beginning to take form. A possibility. Emily sat hunched over her sketchbook, a pencil clutched in her hand like a lifeline. The table was cluttered with papers, not schoolwork, not medical forms, but drawings. Dozens of them. Sleeves, hems, bold lines, soft curves. Designs that had been trapped in her for months were now pouring out, raw and fast. She didn't hear the knock at the back door until the third time. When she opened it, Harold stood there with a brown paper bag, steam rising from the top. I made soup, he said. It's probably terrible, but it's warm. Emily smiled, moving aside to let him in. If it's warm, it's already better than whatever my grandma calls dinner. Harold stepped in carefully, snow clinging to his boots. He placed the bag on the counter and looked around. He'd never been inside before. The apartment was small, worn, but cozy, like time had settled in and refused to leave. His eyes landed on the table. He froze. "You did all of these?" Emily followed his gaze. "Yeah, just had a burst." Harold walked over, lifting one of the pages delicately, as if afraid the ink might vanish. "This is real talent," he said. "Not just hobby stuff. This is the kind of work people pay to see." Emily gave a soft, nervous laugh. "Sure. Once they overlook the wheelchair, the trauma, the lack of formal training." "Stop!" His voice was firm. She blinked. "I told you once. Don't speak like you've already failed." There was silence. The soup on the stove hissed faintly. Harold sat down slowly, unfolding another sketch. A two-piece set with exaggerated sleeves and a high-slit skirt. "You know," he said, not looking at her, "my daughter used to draw too. Nothing like this. Mostly cartoons. Dogs with superhero capes. But I used to sit beside her on the floor, just watching. It was the only time she looked like she wasn't in pain." Emily leaned on the back of a chair, her voice quiet. "Do you talk about her often?" "No," Harold said, "only with you." That landed heavy in the room, not as sadness, but as trust. Later that evening, after they'd eaten the soup, which wasn't terrible, surprisingly, Emily rolled back to the table and hesitated before asking the question that had been brewing for days. "Why me?" Harold looked up from drying his hands. "I mean," she continued, "there are probably dozens of people you pass every day who need help, who are lost or alone or struggling. Why stop for some girl in a bakery with $3 and a wheelchair?" Harold sat across from her, took a breath. "When I saw you in that shop," he said slowly, "you reminded me of myself." Emily frowned. "But I'm not." "You are," he interrupted gently. "I used to think I was invisible. A man in a uniform, walking behind garbage bins, cleaning up after a world that never looks back. Then, one day, someone helped me. Years ago. Bought me lunch when I hadn't eaten in 2 days. Said, 'I see you, man.' Just like that. I never forgot it." His voice grew softer. "When I saw you, fighting for something so small, a cake for your mother, I saw someone who was about to give up, but still had just enough hope left to try one more time. And I thought, if no one shows up for her now, she might stop trying." Emily blinked back tears. He smiled sadly. "So I showed up." That night, after Harold left, Emily rolled back to her room and pulled out a dusty box from under her bed. Inside were things she hadn't touched since the accident: a fabric swatch from her mom's old sewing machine, a school pamphlet from the Baltimore School for the Arts, and a crumpled flyer. She unfolded it slowly. "Inclusive Fashion Show. Applications open. Deadline, February 10th. She stared at it. The date burned into her brain. She glanced at the calendar. 14 days. Her hand trembled. Could she? Should she? Would anyone take her seriously? She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, when Harold arrived for his usual route, she was already outside waiting, bundled in a thick jacket, cheeks pink from the cold, hands gripping her sketchbook like it was made of glass. "I need to ask you something," she said, before he could even say hello. Harold raised an eyebrow. She opened the sketchbook to the flyer, her finger tapping the center. "I want to do this, but I can't do it alone." He stared at the page, then at her. "I'm not asking you to design for me, or draw, or even sew. I need someone to believe I can do it. Loudly. not quietly, not through notes or candy or flowers. I need someone to stand next to me and say, "You can." Can you be that? Harold didn't speak for several seconds. Then he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a $10 bill, and slid it into her sketchbook. "What's this for?" she asked, confused. "Application fee," he said. "Let's start there." Emily stared at him, and for the first time, truly smiled. Not the polite kind, not the tight-lipped, "I'm surviving" kind. A real smile, full of hope. And Harold smiled back, tired, crooked, and maybe a little scared, but real, because somewhere between a cake, a flower, and a broken music box, a new story had begun. And neither of them was walking away. Not this time. The city buzzed with cold. Not the gentle kind, but the bitter kind. The kind that stung your skin and made metal burn to the touch. Yet, inside that little apartment in Highlandtown, something had begun to thaw. Emily was awake before sunrise. Sketches were scattered across the floor like a storm had passed. Her hands were stained with ink and graphite. Coffee sat untouched beside her wheelchair. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but they burned with focus. The deadline was 12 days away. 12 days to design, select fabrics, sew, fit, photograph, and submit 3 complete looks for the inclusive fashion show. A competition that promised not just exposure, but the possibility of a full scholarship to one of the top design schools in New York. It felt like a fantasy. Too big. Too fast. Too much. But Harold kept showing up, sometimes with food, sometimes with fabric samples, sometimes just to sit with her in silence, like his presence alone could keep her from spiraling into fear. And maybe it did. "I don't have a machine," she confessed one morning, defeated. "Even if I sketch everything and pin it, how am I supposed to make the clothes?" Harold leaned back in the chair, scratching his beard. "We'll figure it out." "There's nothing to figure out, Harold. Machines cost money. My grandma's Social Security check barely covers groceries, and yours—" He cut her off gently. "Don't worry about my paycheck." "No, I will. I'm not your daughter. You don't owe me this." Harold's face changed. For a moment, Emily feared she had pushed too far. But then he stood up, crossed the room, and knelt beside her wheelchair. "You listen to me," he said, his voice low, steady. "You're not my daughter. But that doesn't mean I can't care about what happens to you. Maybe this isn't about owing. Maybe this is about choosing." Emily swallowed, her throat thick. "But what if I fail?" she whispered. Harold gave her a long look. "Then you'll fail forward." 2 days later, he showed up with something she hadn't expected. A sewing machine. Not new. Not even close. It was old, scratched, loud. But it worked. Emily gasped. "Where did you—" "Doesn't matter," he said, placing it on the table. "Just try not to sew your fingers off." Her laughter echoed through the room. Sharp, sudden, almost foreign. Even Dolores peeked out from her bedroom, eyebrows raised. For the next week, time became elastic. Days bled into nights. Threads tangled. Needles broke. The old sewing machine rattled like a lawnmower, but Emily didn't stop. Her fingers bled. Her back ached. But she kept going. Harold watched from the corner some evenings, quietly impressed. Other nights, he helped, holding fabric, pinning seams, learning as he went. One evening, he showed up with 3 yards of deep emerald velvet. "Found this in a donation bin," he said. "Thought it might be something." Emily's eyes widened. "This is perfect," she whispered, running her fingers across the fabric. "Looks expensive." "It is." "Should I steal more?" She laughed again. "Maybe just don't get arrested." Harold winked. No promises. But not every day was easy. One afternoon, Emily sat slumped beside the machine, tears falling silently. Harold arrived to find her motionless, a half-stitched bodice crumpled in her lap. "Needles broke. I ruined the hem. And I'm just so tired," she said. "This chair doesn't give. My body hurts. I can't keep pushing it like this." Harold knelt beside her again, hands on his knees. "You think I don't know what exhaustion feels like? I walk 12 miles a day picking up garbage. I come home and my legs don't stop screaming until morning." Emily looked away. He reached out and gently touched her arm. "But you know what I've learned?" She shook her head. "You don't get to the top of the hill unless you keep walking when it hurts the most." Her eyes welled again, not from failure this time, but from recognition. This man, this stranger-turned-companion, understood pain, not in theory, in muscle, in memory. "I just want her to be proud of me," Emily whispered. "Your mom?" She nodded. Harold smiled faintly. "She already is." The next morning, Emily opened her email and froze. There was a message from the contest committee. "Dear applicant, we received your preliminary concept submission. We are impressed by your designs and are pleased to invite you to the live showcase round." Emily screamed. Dolores dropped a spoon in the kitchen. Harold, who had just stepped into the apartment, blinked. "I'm in!" Emily shouted, laughing, crying, shaking all at once. "I'm in!" Harold grinned. "Well, I guess that means we've got more work to do." What followed was a whirlwind. Measurements, adjustments, ribbons, buttons, reseaming, late nights, early mornings, but every stitch felt like resurrection. She wasn't just building outfits, she was rebuilding herself. Each look had a meaning. The first was fire red, sharp-shouldered, the armor she wore to survive grief. The second was midnight blue with soft folds, a memory of her mother's old dress. The third, the emerald velvet gown. It was hope. The one she feared the most. The one she needed to wear herself. But on the eve of the showcase, the weather shifted. The forecast warned of a major storm. Streets were already slick. The city was on alert. Emily stared out the window. "What if they cancel it?" she asked, her voice trembling. Harold was quiet. Then he said something she didn't expect. "They won't. But we need to be ready for anything." And he meant it. Because life, like weather, never asked for permission before it changed everything. The snow began falling before sunrise, soft at first, almost beautiful. By 8 a.m., it was relentless. Thick, blinding sheets sweeping across the streets of Baltimore, muffling the sound of the city under a blanket of white. Emily watched from the window, her fingers trembling not from the cold, but from dread. "They won't cancel," Harold said, appearing behind her. "They can't afford to. Sponsors, press, it's too big." Emily didn't answer. She'd barely slept. Her emerald dress hung on the closet door, finished at last. The stitching around the bodice still wasn't perfect, but it didn't matter. She had created something real, beautiful, hers. Now she just had to get there. The problem? Baltimore wasn't moving. Roads were half closed, buses delayed, ride apps shut down entirely. She turned her wheelchair around, anxiety mounting. "I can't go," she whispered. "There's no way." Harold knelt beside her. "I have a truck," he said. "It's not pretty, but it moves." "Harold," she began, "it's icy. You could slide, crash." He smiled gently. You think I haven't driven through worse? I used to haul garbage through nor'easters. This is just another storm. But. No buts. You've done too much to stop now. Emily looked down. I'm scared. Harold placed a hand on hers. So am I. That made her look up. But being scared doesn't mean you stop. It means you show up anyway. By 10 a.m., they were on the road. Harold's truck rattled like it might fall apart at every stoplight. The windshield wipers fought the snow. The heater barely worked. Emily sat in the passenger seat, emerald dress folded neatly in a garment bag on her lap, clutching it like it might vanish. Worst case, Harold muttered, squinting at the road. I slide into a snowbank, and we call it performance art. Emily chuckled. Do I get extra points if I arrive in a garbage truck? Harold grinned. If they don't give you the damn trophy for that, I'll burn the building down. She laughed harder than she had in weeks. For a moment, the snow didn't matter. The fear didn't matter. It was just the two of them, absurd and brave, heading toward something neither of them fully understood. But fate doesn't always wait at the finish line. Halfway there, only 3 blocks from the venue, the truck skidded. It was only a second. A patch of black ice, a curve in the road too sharp. Emily screamed. The truck spun sideways, slid across the street, and slammed into a snowbank with a violent jolt. Harold's head hit the steering wheel. Silence. The engine coughed. Died. Harold! Emily cried. He groaned. I'm okay, he muttered. Old truck, old bones. We match. Blood trickled from a small gash on his forehead. His left leg was twisted beneath the dashboard. Emily's heart pounded. You're not okay. You can't move your leg. Harold winced. That's new. She looked around. No traffic, no pedestrians. The snow had swallowed everything. They were alone. The venue was 3 blocks away. Harold looked at her. You have to go. What? I can't leave you here. I'll call someone. I'll be fine. But you? No! She was shaking. I'm not doing this without you. Harold's voice softened. Emily, look at me. She did. I didn't come into your life to carry you. I came to remind you that you can carry yourself. Tears burned her eyes. But I'm not ready. Yes, you are. He reached over and touched the dress in her lap. You made this. You earned this. You survived everything. Get out of this truck. Get to that building. Show them who you are. Emily stared at him, breath frozen in her throat. Then, she nodded. Hands trembling, she opened the door and lowered the ramp from the passenger side. The snow was thick, too thick for her wheels alone. But as if by fate, a woman pushing a child in a stroller passed by on the corner. Are you okay? The woman called out. Emily didn't hesitate. Can you help me get to that building? She pointed. 3 blocks down? The woman nodded, instantly understanding. Together, they pushed through the snow. Emily in her chair, dress bag tucked across her lap, cheeks red, breath fogging in front of her. It took 20 agonizing minutes, but she made it. When she reached the backstage entrance, one of the event organizers ran to her. Are you Emily Thompson? We thought you weren't coming. I'm here, she said, breathless. I'm here. Backstage was chaos. Models rushed by, designers barked instructions, hairdryers whirred, lights flickered. Nothing about it was accessible. Everything about it screamed, not for you. And yet, she was here. She changed into her emerald dress in a makeshift corner, aided by a volunteer with trembling hands. Her hair was pinned up. Light makeup dusted across her cheeks. She looked into the mirror and didn't recognize herself. This wasn't the girl in the bakery with $3. This wasn't the paralyzed orphan stuck in Highland Town. This was something else. Someone else. When her name was called, she closed her eyes. Then she wheeled out onto the runway, and the world went silent. The lights were blinding. Rows of them lined the edge of the runway, a narrow path flanked by rows of elegantly dressed judges, photographers, and spectators. The air inside the venue was warm, buzzing with chatter and perfume and money. And then, silence. The crowd hadn't expected her. Emily knew it the second her wheels touched the runway. It was a different kind of silence, not disapproval, not cruelty, but confusion, curiosity, shock. Because here she was, a girl in a wheelchair, young, pale, nervous, wearing an emerald green dress that shimmered under the spotlights like living ivy. She didn't flinch. Her hands, though shaking slightly, gripped the wheels with grace. A volunteer from backstage had offered to push her down the runway, but Emily had said no. She needed to do this herself. Every push of the wheel was slow, deliberate. The fabric of her dress spilled like water over the sides of the chair, designed perfectly to flow with the motion. She moved with dignity, not trying to mimic those who walked, but redefining what elegance could be. Cameras began to flash. It started with 1, then 3, then a dozen. Somewhere in the back, someone whispered, "Who is she?" Emily heard none of it. She kept her eyes forward, shoulders straight. Halfway down the runway, she stopped. Not because she had to, but because she chose to. She turned her chair slightly to one side, just enough for the spotlight to catch the stitching along her back. A subtle tribute to spinal fractures, curved like a spine of emerald thread. The crowd gasped. It wasn't just a dress. It was a story. Emily turned slowly, wheeling herself toward the judge's table at the end. There, she gave the softest nod, almost a bow, then turned and began her return. Her wheels moved smoother now, like she was gliding, like the fear had melted off her skin. And just before exiting the runway, she paused once more. She looked up, just above the crowd, toward the highest row of seats, and she saw him, Harold. He had made it. His forehead had a bandage, his limp was visible, but he was there, standing, even though no one else around him was. Their eyes met. He didn't wave. He didn't shout. He just smiled, that same tired, proud smile, and nodded once. She nodded back. Backstage erupted. Other designers came to her, stunned. A woman with a clipboard and headset pulled Emily aside. "Was that your work? All 3 looks?" Emily nodded. "Who's representing you?" "No one," she replied, chest still heaving. "You're not signed with a school?" "No." "Agency." She shook her head again. The woman stared at her for a moment, then reached for a business card. "My name is Janine Brooks. I work with the New York Institute of Fashion. We need to talk." But before Emily could say anything, an announcer's voice echoed from the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, our judges have made their selection." The crowd buzzed again. Emily's heart pounded. It was too soon, too much, too fast. She wasn't ready. But the moment didn't care. The announcer continued. "This year's winner of the Inclusive Fashion Showcase and recipient of the full scholarship to the New York Institute of Fashion..." Pause. Emily held her breath. Emily Thompson. The room exploded. She didn't hear the cheers. Not at first. All she could feel was her heart, crashing against her ribs, and the tears, sudden, hot, uncontrollable, flooding her eyes. Someone grabbed her shoulders from behind, Janine again, guiding her back onto the runway. This time, when the lights hit her face, she didn't squint. She let them see her. All of her. And when she reached the front, she didn't try to hide the tears running down her cheeks, because those tears weren't weakness. They were victory. From the edge of the crowd, Harold watched it all. He stayed in the shadows, just like he always had. But tonight, he didn't feel invisible. Not anymore. Because the girl in emerald was shining in a room that had never made space for someone like her. And the world was watching. And Harold? He had helped build that light. The venue was almost empty. After the applause faded and the stage lights dimmed, designers packed their tools, makeup artists carried off mirrors, and stylists collected fabric scraps like forgotten memories. Emily sat alone in a hallway just outside the dressing rooms, still in her emerald gown, the folds of velvet now wrinkled with movement. Her award, a glass plaque with her name etched across it in silver, rested on her lap. She touched it, as if unsure it was real. Her hair had come slightly undone, and her cheeks were flushed from emotion, but there was something else on her face now. Peace. The kind that doesn't arrive loud or fast, but creeps in when you've finally come home to yourself. Janine had already handed her a scholarship packet, full of documents, deadlines, forms. "You'll need to make a decision soon," she had said. "New York is waiting." But Emily hadn't opened it yet. Not until she could talk to him. She rolled toward the back of the building, out the side exit, into the quiet street behind the venue. And there he was, Harold, leaning against a telephone pole, holding a cup of gas station coffee, one pant leg torn at the hem, the other stiff from the injury. He looked exhausted and radiant. "You made it," she said softly. He nodded, lifting the coffee. "The truck didn't, but I did." Emily laughed. "You walked." He shrugged. 3 blocks. The pain just made it dramatic. She moved closer, stopping just in front of him. For a moment, neither said anything. Then she held up the plaque. He smiled. "Looks heavy. Want to hold it?" Harold hesitated, then reached out and took it with both hands, staring at her name. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I know," Emily whispered, "but I need to say something." He met her eyes. "You didn't just help me win a contest. You didn't just push me to finish a dress or roll onto a runway. You reminded me that I existed, that I still mattered, that even after everything, the chair, the accident, the loneliness, I could still choose to be more than what happened to me." Harold blinked. Emily swallowed hard, then continued. "I spent so many months after the accident waiting for someone to save me. Anyone. A miracle. A doctor. Something. And then you walked into that bakery. Not a hero, not a rich man, not a genius, just you. And you didn't fix me. You didn't try to. You just saw me." Her voice cracked. "I will never forget that." Harold looked down, emotion swimming in his eyes. "I wasn't trying to change your life," he said. "Truth is, I think you changed mine." Emily tilted her head. "How?" He exhaled, voice thick. "I've spent so long walking invisible, Emily. Picking up after everyone, keeping my head down, and I told myself it was enough. That I didn't need to be seen. But watching you fight your way back, create something from the ashes, it made me wonder if maybe I still have something left too." Emily smiled. "I think you have a lot left." Harold chuckled. "You know, back in the day, I used to write music." "You did?" "Just small stuff, for my daughter mostly. Lullabies, chords I'd strum on a busted guitar after she fell asleep." Do you still play? He shook his head. Haven't touched a string since she passed. Emily thought for a moment. Maybe it's time. Time? To pick it back up. Start again. Like I did. He looked at her, unsure. She nudged his arm. You reminded me that my story wasn't over. Let me remind you, neither is yours. That night, Harold drove her home in a cab. The two sat in silence most of the way, each lost in thought, the world outside painted in snow and streetlight. When they arrived at her building, he walked her to the front door. Emily turned before going inside. There's something else. Harold raised an eyebrow. I want you to come to New York with me, to the presentation. My first collection. You have to be there. He shook his head gently. I'm not a runway guy. You're my runway guy. He laughed. That doesn't even mean anything. It means you belong there. Harold hesitated. I'm just a garbage man, Em. Emily's smile faded. She wheeled closer. No. You're the man who found a girl in pieces and gave her the tools to rebuild. You're not garbage. You're gold. Harold's throat tightened. You really want me there? I don't want you there, she said softly. I need you there. He looked down, blinking, then nodded. As Harold turned to leave, she called out one more time. Hey, Harold. He turned. Thank you. For the cake. Harold smiled, eyes glistening. It was never just about the cake. And then he walked into the night, no longer invisible. Just a man finally being seen. It was March when Emily landed in New York City. Spring was trying. Timid cherry blossoms peeked from the trees, and slush clung to the gutters like winter's final whisper. The city roared around her, too big, too fast, too alive. She felt small rolling through JFK Airport, but her eyes sparkled with the thrill of it all. Harold stepped off the plane behind her, his movements stiff. The limp from the accident hadn't fully healed. You sure you're okay walking all this? Emily asked, glancing back. I've walked through worse, Harold muttered. Besides, you're the VIP. I'm just the +1. She gave him a look. You're not a plus anything. You're the reason I'm here. He didn't respond, but the corner of his mouth twitched, just enough to betray the pride swelling in his chest. The next day, the presentation hall buzzed with energy. Rows of seats were filled with media, designers, influencers, and skeptics. Tall banners hung from the rafters, each displaying the names of the finalists. Emily's banner was last. She sat backstage, staring at her hands. Her fingers trembled. She wasn't nervous about her designs. They were finished, pressed, perfect. It wasn't the crowd or the cameras. It was the moment. This was it. The moment her life might change. The moment she'd stop being the girl in the chair with the sad story and start being something else. Someone else. You good? Harold's voice came from behind. She turned to find him standing at the doorway, wearing a suit she'd never seen before, dark gray, slightly wrinkled. But it fit him. He looked different. Still Harold, but cleaner, sharper, braver. I thought you didn't own a suit, she teased. I borrowed it from my neighbor. He wears it to court. She laughed. Emily, Harold said, stepping inside, his tone shifting. Before you go out there, I need to say something. She grew quiet. He sat beside her, hands on his knees. I've spent most of my life thinking I had nothing left to give. After my daughter died, I stopped showing up for life. I just worked, breathed, slept, existed. He looked at her, voice unsteady. Then you showed up, and you were hurt, and angry and brilliant. And I thought, maybe I wasn't done after all. Maybe I could still mean something. Emily's eyes filled. "You mean everything," she said. Harold shook his head. "You don't understand. You gave me purpose again. You made me feel again. You woke me up." She reached over and held his hand. They sat like that, two people from different worlds, bound by pain, rebuilt by each other. Then a voice called from outside, "Emily Thompson, you're on in 5. She stood, or rather, rolled forward, and took a deep breath. "You ready?" Harold asked. She nodded. "I was born ready. I just forgot for a while." The lights hit harder in New York. The runway stretched longer, the ceilings higher, but when the curtain opened and Emily emerged, wearing one of her signature pieces, the world paused. This time, no one whispered. They stared. They saw. And Emily, steady in her wheelchair, adorned in her own creation, moved like she'd never been broken. Every design was a chapter of her survival. The fire-red dress, sharp, bold, dared the room to underestimate her. The midnight blue, flowing, romantic, reminded them of softness in strength. The emerald green, her crown jewel, shone like purpose stitched into silk. She wheeled to the front, stopped, lifted her chin, and the room rose to its feet. A standing ovation. Even the judges. Even the coldest faces. Harold, in the back row, wiped his eyes. After the show, there were handshakes, cameras, business cards, opportunities she hadn't dared to dream about. But the most important moment came quietly. A reporter approached Emily as she returned backstage, a microphone in her face. "Emily, people are calling you the next big voice in inclusive fashion. What's your secret? Who inspired you?" Emily didn't hesitate. She turned to find Harold, still standing nearby, trying to blend into the wall. She pointed. "Him." The reporter looked confused. "Who is he?" Emily rolled closer, took Harold's arm, and pulled him into view. "This man didn't just help me. He believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. When I had nothing, no money, no hope, no plan, he gave me more than a cake in a bakery. He gave me back my future." Harold looked frozen. "I wouldn't be here without him," she said. The reporter turned to Harold. "Sir, would you mind sharing your name?" He blinked, then spoke softly. "Harold Jenkins." "And what do you do, Mr. Jenkins?" He gave a faint smile. "I take out the trash. But sometimes I find treasure." The room fell silent again, and then applause. From the reporters, the staff, the designers. Not for Emily this time. For him. For the invisible man who had been seen at last. Emily leaned into his side, whispering, "You're not just part of my story, Harold. You are the story." And in that moment, no lights, no cameras, no fashion shows in New York could ever shine brighter than the look in Harold Jenkins's eyes. 3 months later, spring had fully taken over Baltimore. The snow was long gone, and in its place, streets buzzed with new life. Trees blossomed, kids ran past stoops, and flowers leaned out of cracked sidewalks like survivors of some quiet war. Emily sat on the rooftop of her apartment building, legs wrapped in a blanket, sunlight catching the curls of her hair. She had a sketch pad on her lap, but for once, she wasn't drawing. She was watching the city, listening to it breathe. Her phone buzzed. A message popped up from NY Institute. "Your class schedule is confirmed. Welcome aboard." She smiled softly. It was real now. The scholarship, the new apartment, the chance to build her brand. She was moving to New York in less than 2 weeks, and she wasn't going alone. Downstairs, Harold stood by a pile of old boxes on the curb, dressed in his orange uniform for the last time. He handed his keys and ID badge to the sanitation supervisor, who clapped him on the shoulder. 22 years, huh? The man said. What are you going to do now? Sit on a porch and drink sweet tea? Harold chuckled. Maybe. Or maybe I'll follow some girl to New York and help her build a fashion empire. The supervisor blinked. You serious? Harold shrugged. She changed my life. Feels like the least I can do. Then he walked away. No fanfare. No parade. Just a man moving on. But inside, everything had changed. He wasn't carrying garbage anymore. He was carrying hope. 2 weeks later, in New York City, the lights of the subway flickered as Emily and Harold stood on a platform together. She had her sketchbook. He had a guitar case. I thought you said you couldn't play anymore, she teased, tapping the case. I said I hadn't, Harold replied. Didn't say I wouldn't. They boarded the train and sat side by side. As the train roared through the tunnels, Emily pulled out a folded piece of paper, the first flower he ever left her. Dried, pressed, still wrapped in its original brown paper and red string. I never asked, she said, holding it up. Why a carnation? Harold smiled. It was my daughter's favorite. Strong flower. Doesn't need much. Just a little water and light. Emily nodded slowly. That's what you gave me. He looked at her, the young woman in the wheelchair, no longer broken, no longer silent, no longer hiding. And he said, No, Em, you gave yourself the light. I just reminded you where the switch was. 6 months later. Emily stood backstage once again, this time at her own show. Her brand, Thompson & Thread, was launching its first independent line. The venue was packed. Buyers, media, big names in fashion. But she wasn't nervous, because she wasn't alone. Harold stood beside her, tuning his guitar. Are you sure about this? He asked. You want me to open the show? She grinned. You've always been part of the story. It's time people hear it. He took a breath, then stepped onto the stage. The lights dimmed. The music began, a soft, haunting melody. A song he had written for his daughter, unfinished for years, now complete. As the music played, the models rolled and walked down the runway, able-bodied and disabled of all shapes and shades, wearing Emily's designs, bold, adaptable, unapologetically real. The crowd rose in a standing ovation by the end, not just for the fashion, but for what it represented. Later that night, standing beneath the city lights, Emily looked out at the skyline. Harold joined her, carrying 2 cups of hot cocoa. No cake this time? She teased. I figured cocoa was safer. He grinned. She sipped quietly, then asked, Do you ever think about how it all started? He nodded. $3, a bakery, a girl with a stubborn heart. And a garbage man with a broken one, she added. He looked at her, smiled soft. You saved me too. She touched his arm. Then we're even. They stood there in silence for a while. Then Emily whispered, I think she would have loved this. My mom. She would have been proud, Harold said. And so would my daughter. They looked at each other, not with sadness, but with peace, because they both knew the pain never really leaves. But it changes. It becomes roots, and from it, something beautiful grows. Sometimes it only takes one small act, a cake, a note, a stranger who sees what others don't, to rewrite an entire life. If this story made you feel something, don't let it stop here. Leave a comment, hit like, or subscribe. Not just for the next part, but because stories like this deserve to be felt, shared, and remembered.